So, hi everyone. Welcome to Who's That Bird? An introduction to basic bird identification. I'm Pammy Price, and I am the preserve naturalist and educator here at the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. And I'm here tonight with Dylan to talk about bird ID. So, winter's a great time to learn about how to identify birds. The leaves are off the trees, so it's easier to see them, and there are less birds around, so it's easier to identify individual birds and bird sounds. So maybe we can do the first poll before we get to it.
Yeah. So our first poll is, yeah, we got some polls to kind of engage you guys tonight. So our first poll, I'm gonna launch it right now, and you should be able to click on the answer. The first one's pretty easy. Have you visited the Albany Pine Bush Preserve? So I'm gonna relaunch.
I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing it?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
here it comes.
Okay, it goes.
It's here.
Oh, yay.
Yay.
All right. Whoa. Wow, that goes fast. My goodness. All right, that's pretty much everybody. Wow, man, that goes, goodness. All right, so I'm going to share the results just quick in case anybody wants to see. So we've got 68% of you have visited the Albany Pine Bush Preserve before, and 32% have not. Hopefully those who have not will have an opportunity to, or will feel motivated to after our presentation tonight.
Awesome. So I will let you take it away, Dylan.
All right. Thanks, Pammy. All right, everybody. So for those of you who are familiar, those 70% that have been here, this might be kind of an overview for you. But for those of you who haven't, I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit about what the Albany Pine Bush Preserve is and why it's special. So the Albany Pine Bush Preserve was kind of the result of this big, cool geological story. There was a glacier covering this area, and as that glacier receded, we were left with a large lake, Glacial Lake Albany. You can kind of see it outlined here in blue. And this lake was about 175 miles long, 90 feet deep. And of course, it had all these creeks and rivers and streams flowing into it, including the Mohawk River. And so that lake eventually drained, and we were left with all these sandy deposits, which you can kind of see in here in these peachy colors. So these sandy deposits were left, and those were kind of the bottom of the lake. Now, the Albany Pine Bush Preserve located down here was kind of special because we had some prevailing winds coming from the northwest that were blowing between the Adirondacks and the Catskills. So rather than having a flat sand plain, our sands here got blown into an inland dune field. So this is kind of a topographic map showing you what the pine bush looks like from above, kind of with all the development and all the vegetation removed. So you can kind of see all these U shapes are those sand dunes. So this is a pretty cool system. There are not many inland sand dunes. Usually you see sand dune fields like this on the coast. So it's pretty cool that this one is located so interior. But of course, it isn't like what we see on the coast. It's very much vegetated. And here in the Albany Pine Bush Preserve, it became vegetated by a globally rare community that we call an inland pitch pine scrub oak barrens. The larger ecosystem we call a northeastern interior pine barrens, but it contains this globally rare community. And it has a state rank of 1 and a global rank of 2, which just means that there are less than 5 occurrences of this community in the state, and globally there are less than 20. So this is a pretty rare habitat on this rare geology, and it's one of the best remaining examples in the world of this type of habitat. It's also the type locality for a very special butterfly, the Karner blue butterfly. It's both federally and state listed. And type locality means that this is the locality from where the species was described, which is pretty cool. So the pine bush can look a lot of different ways. It's what we call a disturbance dependent habitat. So it requires disturbance to kind of open it back up. So in any given point in the life of a pine barrens, it can kind of exist in one of these successional variants. So over here on this far side, we can see we've got not much shrub cover, very low tree cover. This is what we would call a successional northern sandplain grassland. And this, for example, is what we see a lot of time after we remove black locust from the pine bush. This pitch pine scrub oak barrens, that's our sweet spot here. That's what we're really aiming to keep. And if we keep kind of successing or growing beyond that, we can turn into this pitch pine scrub oak thicket where the scrub oak gets really dominant, or we can get more tree canopy and turn into this pitch pine oak forest. So in any given year, these communities would be kind of moving among these successional variants, depending on the frequency of disturbance. And historically here, that disturbance came in the form of fire. Now, the pine bush is not exactly what it used to look like back in its heyday when that glacier receded and the sand was all blown up. We estimate that the community here was between 25 and 50,000 acres in size. We've got a little over 3,300 acres protected as part of the pine bush today. So most of that has been lost to development. So this is the Crossgates Mall. It's located right inside of the pine bush. Also other development, but even the green spaces that we have left have become degraded. So some of that is due to fire suppression. Remember I said it's a disturbance dependent habitat, and fire was historically what would have disturbed that habitat and kind of reset it back to those nice open communities. So fire has been suppressed largely because of all the development around. So the pine bush looks very different from what it looked like historically. We've also had invasive species move in. So this is honeysuckle. This is a black locust. So these are species that are not native to this vegetation community, and in the absence of fire have been allowed to move in and kind of take over. So we don't have a whole lot of it left, and what we do have left needs a little bit of work. So this is just to give you an idea of historically what the pine bush looked like. So this is a picture from the 1950s. You can actually see some dark areas on this map. That is actually where wildfires were still occurring. And now I'm going to overlap a photo from actually just earlier this week from Google Earth, just to show you how the landscape has changed. So we've got the New York State Thruway now cuts right through the pine bush and divides it north and south. This is Route 155 or New Corner Road, cuts it kind of east and west. This is Crossgates Mall down here. This is the 87 Northway and 90 interchange. This is the Albany Rapp Road Waste Management Facility. Right here on New Corner Road is our Discovery Center. But you can see there's still some nice, pretty big patches of pine bush left, but it's very fragmented and divided up. So that means that we do a lot of work here to try and maintain what little pine bush we have left. And so sometimes in dramatic cases that involves taking something that looks like this, that black locust clone, over to this, which is that nice open inland pitch pine scrub oak barrens. And we use a lot of tools to do that. Principally, we want to use fire, but a lot of times putting fire in a locust clone is not going to be super effective. So sometimes we have to use some silvicultural treatments to remove the trees. We might even use some herbicides to thin out some of those invasive species. And then hopefully once we've opened it up and restored it, we can use fire to maintain it. So this, as you might guess, because it's this globally rare community, it also supports a lot of rare wildlife. So SGCN is a term that's given to species of, they're called species of greatest conservation need. And these are species that were determined by the New York State DEC to be in need of some kind of conservation assistance. So this includes state endangered, state threatened, and also a suite of other species that might not persist on the landscape without some kind of assistance. So the latest state wildlife action plan designated 366 species in New York as species of greatest conservation need. And since 1980, we have documented 74 of those species in the Pine Bush Preserve. Now, it might not surprise you to learn that of those 74 species, 46 of them are birds. So a lot of rare and cool birds here in the Pine Bush, which has earned us both the New York State DEC designation as a bird conservation area and also an Audubon important bird area. And just to give you an idea of some of the criteria that you have to meet in order to get those designations, you have to be a migratory concentration site. You have to have diverse species. You might have individual species of concern that are concentrated there. A good example is the prairie warblers or brown thrashers. And also a species at risk site for species of conservation concern or range restricted species. So all these criteria kind of worked together to get these designations. It also means that we do a lot of research with birds in the preserve. We use them as indicators to the success or lack of success with our management and restoration efforts. So we do point counts. So that's what this map is showing you. The points are located on our trail system, our old trail system. And we go and listen at these points and record all the birds that we hear singing, calling, or any birds that we see in a 10-minute period at each one of these points. And that kind of gives us a rudimentary idea of which bird species are where, maybe an abundance by getting kind of counts of how many singing males we hear at each point. If we want to dig a little bit deeper and find out if birds are successfully reproducing here, are they returning here, are they coming here to breed, then we do some bird banding. So that's when we are marking individuals to see if they're coming back to the preserve. And especially our community scientists have helped us a lot recently with helping to survey for some of our rare species like eastern whippoorwills, American woodcocks, and common nighthawks. So I'm just going to focus a little bit on our community science here. And if you are interested in helping us survey for our community science, you can sign up on our website. So these are all up and coming this year.
Do we want to do our poll here about?
Oh, right. Yes.
Science?
Thank you, Tammy. Let's see. So I'm going to go to slide 11. So yeah, I'm going to launch this poll. I'm just curious if anybody has participated in a community science project. So hopefully you guys are seeing that.
We're seeing it.
Oh, there it goes. Oh my goodness. It goes so fast once it starts. All right. That's mostly everybody. I'll share the results real quick for you guys that are curious. So about 16% of you on tonight have participated in a community science project and 84% have not. So I hope there are these really mutually beneficial opportunities that our community scientists are kind of our ears on the ground, eyes and ears on the ground, helping us survey for these species. And they also kind of get to see this, kind of be a part of this like research and see kind of the backside of what we're trying to accomplish here. So for our American woodcock surveys, these green points are where we have volunteers go out. It's a trailside survey. So the volunteers go out and listen at these points for the song displays, the male courtship displays of the American woodcock, which are pretty entertaining. Our community scientists also help us survey for eastern whippoorwills. So these are also trailside surveys for the most part. And the eastern whippoorwills, so both the American woodcock and eastern whippoorwill are species of concern. They're in decline across their range. So they're species that we really want to understand what they're doing here in the Pine Bush and how they're doing here in the Pine Bush. So same kind of system here, except these ones, you got to go out when the moon is out. So it's a little bit, our woodcock surveys take place right at dusk, and our whippoorwill surveys take place at night when the full moon is up. And finally, in the fall, the Hudson Mohawk Bird Club does a survey at the end of August for migrating common nighthawks. So kind of the last week of August is a great time. They come and sit in the parking lot with their scopes and they count common nighthawks as they fly over the Discovery Center. So community scientists are amazing people. And we can't thank them enough for what they help us do. And all of this kind of really helps us learn more about our birds here. All right, and now I'm going to hand it back to Pammy, who's going to get into some more nitty-gritty about bird ID.
Sure, but can you just put up one more poll for
I sure
us?
can.
So
All right.
I'm just wondering how many people, have been out identifying birds before and what your skill was.
This is the first time I've used the polls, and they're very exciting.
They're fun.
All right. And that's just about everybody. So I'll share that, Pammy, so you can see.
Awesome. So we have a pretty good mix. So hopefully no one will get bored. Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah.
All right. So I love birds, and watching birds can be fun. And just by watching birds, you can make a difference for science and bird conservation by participating in some of these community science things. So I'm just going to tell you a few ways to easily start your bird ID journey. So I have the next slide, Dylan? So I'm going to use the 4 keys to bird identification that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology uses for identifying birds by sight. And we'll also talk a little bit about identifying birds by sound later as well. So the first thing that you look at is size and shape. That combination of size and shape is one of the most powerful tools to identification. The second thing that you'll look at is color pattern. You'll focus on patterns instead of trying to match every single feather color. The third thing we'll look at is behavior. That's basically how the birds wear their feathers, what they do with what they're doing, how they're sitting. Every single bird has a unique way of acting, moving, flying, sitting, and getting to recognize them by their behaviors is a really helpful way to identify them. And then the fourth thing is habitat. It's usually both the first and last question that you'll ask yourself when you're identifying a bird, because that's a good way to narrow down your list and to help you to identify birds that look very similar, except for maybe where they are or how they're sitting. Can I have the next one? So the first thing you'll look at is size and shape. You can just judge size against birds you know well, or you can look at the size of the bird against another bird that's in the same field of view. You can look at the way they're sitting or the shape. Different birds can be in different groups by their shapes. Next slide. So we can look at their silhouettes. They can quickly tell you a basic bird's proportions and the posture, and that can help you to rule out many other groups of birds. Your estimate of your size is more accurate if you can compare one bird to another, especially if you know one of those birds. And like I said before, if you learn the different postures, you can tell them just by seeing their shadow or their silhouette. Okay, can I have the next slide? And then once you learn the different sizes and shapes, you can use those skills to measure the bird against themselves. And that comes in really handy when you're looking at birds that look really similar. For example, Downy and hairy woodpeckers look almost exactly the same, except they're a little bit different in size. But the way to really make sure that you are identifying them correctly is to measure their bill against the size of their head. So the downy woodpecker's bill is about half the size of his head, whereas the hairy woodpecker's bill is about the same size as his head. And it's also can be used to tell apart two common hawks that we often see, the sharp chin hawk and the Cooper's hawk. So you can tell them by comparing their body, their head to their body. The sharp-shinned hawk's head barely protrudes from the front of its wings, whereas the Cooper's hawk has a much more prominent head. Can I have the next one? So another thing that you can look at is behavior and color. They're also really great ways to help with bird identification. Where it is and what it's doing are really important clues in helping to identify birds. And remember, we're going to try to look at those basic color patterns, just the three main colors that you see on the bird. Next slide. So when we're looking at behavior, you're looking at kind of the bird's attitude. You look at the posture. That can help you to look at similarly proportioned birds and know which one is which. Like, for instance, a mourning dove sits more crouched over, whereas a rock dove is kind of has more like a pot belly. You can also look at how they move. Some birds just sit still for a while other birds might walk up a tree with their head up, and some might actually walk up and down a tree. And other birds might run from place to place, and some just sit and then jump from place to place. You just learn the things as you watch the birds. Another thing is when you're watching ducks on the water, you can learn which ducks are going to submerge themselves completely or the ones that are just going to tip up. And then you can also look at flight patterns. Certain birds have certain flight patterns. Like, I always know a great blue heron because it has really slow wing flaps. It looks like a giant pterodactyl slowly flapping his wings across the sky. Woodpeckers often have a long swooping flight right before they land. And other birds have distinctive flying styles. You can also watch birds and learn about their behavior from their feeding styles. You'll know a great blue heron, again, I'll use, because they'll stand in the water forever stalking their prey. But for instance, a kingfisher sits on a branch, just you wouldn't even know they were hunting until all of a sudden they plunge into the water to catch that fish. And then there are some kinds of birds that like to hang around together or that flock. Some birds like to be together near a feeder. Like, a lot of times you'll see chickadees and titmice and downy woodpeckers together. So that's another way that you can help to identify which bird is which. Next bird. So when you're looking at colors, you are going to focus on patterns instead of trying to match every single color. So you'll try to look at whether the colors are light or dark, because some birds will be very similar, but they might have darker streaking on their breast, or they might have really sharp streaking versus faint streaking, or broader or blurrier streaking. They also might have some outrageous color, like American goldfinch are always that bright yellow color in the spring when they're wanting to show off to the females. Or they might have a special uh, color somewhere on their body that you're going to see, like the rose-breasted grosbeak has that red right on its chest right there under its chin. Or other birds might flash colors, like red-winged blackbird has that red epaulet that it'll show to the girl birds or show off when it's trying to get other birds to stay out of its territory. And you can also look for different patterns. Some birds have patterns. The next thing that you would look at is habitat. So that's our next slide. Oh, actually, I will turn it over to Dylan for a couple of identification.
Thanks, Pammy. So I just wanted to go over in a little bit more detail where you might see those colors or patterns on the birds. And you might see some terms used when you're looking in field guides. And so first here I have the wing. And what you want to know is that there's these big feathers here. Those are the flight feathers. So those are the ones that they're actually using to fly. And then kind of on top of those feathers are what we call coverts. And there's a whole bunch of coverts. There's coverts that cover these feathers, the primaries. There's coverts that cover the secondaries. And then there's coverts that cover the coverts and coverts that cover the coverts that cover the coverts. So you can kind of think of these feathers as just covering the bases of the flight feathers. So they're kind of protecting those flight feathers. And that can be important because the wing is where you see that color might look very different when the wing is open versus when the wing is closed. So when the wing is open like this, you can see these nice primary coverts. They're in yellow here. You can also see all of these secondary and median and lesser coverts. But when the wing is closed, you won't be able to see those primary coverts or really much of the primary feathers at all. Mostly what you're going to see when the wing is closed is these secondary coverts and lesser and median coverts. And a lot of times that's where those, when you hear the term wing bar, so that mostly will be on those secondary coverts or maybe on the bottom of these secondaries. So when the bird is sitting resting with the wing closed, it will look like it has 2 bars or maybe 1 bar. And usually that's where that's located. There are also some other places on the bird that you might hear people refer to. So the lore is the little spot between the eye and the beak or the bill. Some birds might have an eye line, or they might have a ring, an eye ring. So a ring around the eye. You'll also hear people talk about maybe the crown. So that will be the top of the head. Some birds have a mustache. So a good example are pileated woodpeckers. So males have a red mustache and females have a black mustache. You also have the breast here, the belly, the flank. You might also see people refer to the rump. So that's a common spot on, for example, the yellow rumped warbler. They're so named because they have a little yellow spot right on their rump, also referred to as butterbutts. And then some other birds might have some more unique things, like you might see a crest, like on a cardinal or a titmouse. You might see that they have a crest, and that's something unique that you might want to note. So again, here, just kind of a couple different diagrams to show you where those parts are on the bird in case you've seen any of these words when you're trying to identify things. And again, just to reiterate, when that wing is closed, what you're going to see here are those secondary feathers and those secondary coverts. And here's a wing bar right here at the end of those secondary coverts. Sometimes if the bird's wing is open, so here's a couple good examples of how some features you can only see when the wings are open. So this is actually the underside of the wing on a rose-breasted grosbeak. The males have this that nice red color they have on their breast. They also have on the underside of their wings. And on ducks, they have these like very beautiful secondary feathers that are usually beautifully brightly colored, kind of metallic-y. That's called the speculum on ducks. And that's much easier to see when the wing is open. Sometimes you can see it when the wing is closed, but So just a couple more little hints to help you out with ID. And now I'll hand it back to Pammy to talk about habitat.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the one way to narrow down your list of the birds that you might see is by thinking of the habitat that you're going to be visiting. So the habitat includes where the bird finds its food, water, cover, and space. So you can build a list of the birds that you're likely to see by either looking in your field guides and looking at range maps, or by going on eBird and having it build a list for you. So those are the kinds of things that you would look for, is where you're going to go, and then make a list of those birds, and then you can narrow it down so you have a shorter list to pick from when you do see the birds. All right, and the next. Oh, this will again talk about habitat. I was going to put some range maps in here, but I put it in the other slideshow. So another way to look is by using those range maps that I just talked about that are in your field guide. Check the time of year. Sometimes you might look in your field guide and say, oh, this bird is in the area, but then look at the range map and find out that the time of year they're not in the area because they've migrated because it's winter. So again, this will tell you when birds are likely to be around and help you to find out what you're likely to see. So another way that you can learn about birds is by listening to them. So we have one more poll, and then Dylan is going to talk a little bit about learning bird songs and calls.
All right, while the poll is going, I had somebody ask in the Q&A about the bird on my shoulder. This is Trooper. Trooper is a orange-fronted parakeet or conure. Trooper is a rescue. He's kind of a result of inbreeding in the bird pet trade. So he had a stroke when he was 6 months old. So he is not able to fly. He can walk, and he climbs around really well, and he likes to sit on my shoulder. But you may notice that Trooper's missing some feathers, and that's because he's kind of a special needs guy. All right. I'm going to end that poll. All right, so we've got most people, 81% of people have used sound to identify birds. That's excellent. Well done, everybody. I did not used to listen to birds a whole lot, and then I started, and it kind of like the world exploded. So for those of you who have not tried, hopefully we'll give you the courage tonight to give it a shot. So what's the difference between a call and a song? So calls are usually, they're maybe not as melodious, maybe not as pretty sounding. And those are usually birds talking to each other, just kind of contact calls like, hey, I'm over here. So sometimes calls are more hard to identify. A lot of calls for different groups can sound very similar. So the sparrows, you can sometimes say, oh, that's a sparrow. But as far as getting down to species can be a little bit harder with a call. It's easier with a song. So a song is a bird communicating to another bird of its species, usually a female or a male, that, hey, I'm a male. Usually it's the males, although female birds will sing in some instances, but usually it's in regard to breeding. So they're kind of advertising themselves as a mate for breeding opportunities. And so they're telling females that they would like to mate and they have some nice habitat, but they're also telling other males in the area to stay away. So you can listen for these. And you can also, again, as Pammy mentioned before, you can use the context around you, the habitat where you're at, and in combination with hearing those sounds to try and put together what you are hearing. You can also take into account when you're hearing it. So obviously, if you're out at nighttime, most of our songbirds don't sing during the nighttime. There are some chipping sparrows, sometimes will sing at nighttime, but for the most part, most of our songbirds are going to be active more in the daytime. So if you hear a bird making a sound at nighttime, it could be an owl, or it could be some kind of nocturnal bird like a whippoorwill. And of if you want to hear lots of bird songs, the best time is for the dawn chorus. So right at the beginning of the day, all those birds are getting right out there. They've had a good night's sleep, and they're advertising to everybody at the beginning of the day. Just reiterating, this is my territory. Don't come over here unless you're a lady and you're interested in having some babies with me. Then please come over. So we're just going to show you or play for you. You know what? Actually, I think I'm going to stop my share real quick because I need to share my sound. Let's see. Nope. All right. I am going to stop my sound share, and then I'm going to share. Advanced. Oh, share sound. There it is. I got it, peeps. I got it. Okay. All right. So, Pammy put up these great spectrograms here. This is something that Pammy has found very helpful when she's learning bird songs. Pammy, I don't know if you want to pop on and talk about the spectrograms. I don't use them very much.
Sure. So, I find them really helpful for people who are like visual, because they help you to see as the bird singing how close their sounds are together through time, how loud they are, because you can see the difference on the spectrograms and the pitch. So it really helps me to visualize it as I'm listening. And another thing that also helps me is if I am watching the bird, to like watch its bill as it's moving. Like, it sounds silly, but it really does help.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that is, I will agree. All right. So some common terms when you're thinking about the sound that a bird is making is the tempo. Is it fast paced? Is it slow? The pitch. So is it very high pitched? Is it very low pitched? The volume. Some birds are really emphatic when they're singing, and some birds can be really quiet. And actually, some birds get quieter when they're closer to another male. It's called whisper singing. If it's sometimes it can mean the bird is real mad. If he thinks that a bird's in his territory, he will start whisper singing, which is actually even a little quieter. Rhythm, repetition. So is it kind of nice melodious, or are there phrases that are repeated inside of the song or the call? Does it have a trill and tone quality? So is it kind of a whistle? Is it more of a song? So once you start listening to bird songs, some of these terms will start to make a little bit more sense, but we're also going to demonstrate some of these for our common species. So you may be familiar with this bird. This is the northern cardinal. And this is a species that's interesting because both the male and the female will sing. So sometimes they actually will just sing back and forth to each other. So I'll play the call here first. Hopefully you guys can hear that.
Yes, we're hearing it.
Thank you, Pammy. So again, the call doesn't really sound like much. That's kind of like a contact call. That's just kind of a male saying or a female saying, I'm over here. Like, where are you? A lot of times they'll use that when they kind of want to be more secretive, or if they're talking to young. So here's a couple examples of song. So hopefully these guys will start hearing them do this pretty soon. Some of you may have heard it already, given that we've had a couple warm days here. And here's another variation. So this is one of those ones that's pretty emphatic sounding, like he sounds like he's putting his whole body behind that song. Another common one we have around here is the red-breasted nuthatch. So this is one of our species that doesn't have a song per se. I like to say that these guys sound like their calls actually sound like a car alarm, kind of. So in this case, you can kind of hear that pitch isn't really changing much. It's not really what you would call a trill. Trooper's getting involved now. It's not really what you would call a trill, but it's kind of a repeated phrase. So, and then this is more of their song. That's the one that kind of sounds more like a car alarm. Kind of nasal quality to it. Sounds like he's singing with his nose plugged. Another common bird we have here is the chickadee. And again, these are here year round. So I've actually heard these guys start to do their songs, but these are what their calls sound like. So their common name actually comes from their call. It sounds like they're saying chickadee dee 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 dee. Play that again. And here is their song. So again, we're probably going to start hearing this more as our spring starts to happen. These guys actually do start singing kind of early. And this is a case where you might come up with a mnemonic. So that's a term for when you put words to a song to help you remember. So for black-capped chickadees, what I say is they're saying cheeseburger, cheeseburger. So let's see if you guys agree. Oh, did I just play there? Oh, he's coming. You can yeah, I was just going to say, you can hear another chickadee singing in the background if you listen really carefully. So frequently they'll sing this and you'll hear another male and they're kind of singing back and forth to each other. Sometimes it's really hard to hear that last part of the cheeseburger. Sometimes it just sounds like cheeseburger, but it's cheeseburger. So in that case, we've got that higher pitch that kind of goes down. It's got that pretty whistly quality to it. All right, this is another common bird around here that we see year round, the downy woodpecker. We can tell it's downy because as Pammy showed us before, we can look at the length of that bill, right, relative to the length of the width of the head. So that bill is not as long as the head is wide there. So this is a downy woodpecker. And for these guys, I don't really have a mnemonic, but I like to think downy, down. So their trill kind of goes down in pitch, and you'll hear that here towards the end. So the hairy woodpeckers look similar and sound a little bit similar. Their call note is more of a peak instead of a pick. And their whinny call will actually stay on one pitch. So if you hear that pitch go down, then you have a downy. And if you hear it staying on the same pitch, then you have a hairy. This might be my favorite bird. This is a tufted titmouse. And again, a year-round bird, and they sound pretty angry in their calls. Kind of similar to the chickadees, but you don't get that like chickadee quality to it. You mostly get the dee 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 dee, and it sounds a little bit more whiny. And these guys, for their song, I like to say they're saying Peter, 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 Peter. So these are another bird that I anticipate hearing pretty soon as we get closer to spring. They start to sing pretty early. And I'll hand it back to Pammy.
Thanks, Dylan. So remember, if it has feathers, it's a bird, and you want to find out who it is. We really want to just give you some of those identification clues so that you can have those 4 keys to the ID in your head, have that extra little thing in your back pocket about knowing the songs. Remember size and shape, color pattern, behavior, and habitat. And then just a little note about binoculars. When you're looking at binoculars, the numbers are, the first number is for the magnification, and the second number is the lens diameter. So in this case, the 8 would be the magnification, and the 42 would be the lens diameter. And the bigger the difference between the 2 numbers, the brighter the image. But one thing you have to remember, that if the lens diameter is greater than 50, the binoculars will get pretty heavy. And if it's less than 30, there won't be enough light. So most birders choose full-size binoculars with a center focus dial that are magnification 8 by somewhere between 40 and 45 lens diameter, or magnification of 10 with a lens diameter of somewhere between 30 and 35. So one thing that I'm really into is community science. And so that's why I'm really excited to be working with Dylan. And one way that you can be a community scientist is by participating in the 26th annual Great Backyard Bird Count. You can do it from your backyard. You can do it from the Albany Pine Bush. You can do it from your local park. You can do it with your neighbor. You can do it by yourself. But you can join people around the world anytime between February 17th and 20th. As we come together to watch, to learn about, and to count and celebrate birds. So you can enter your counts at birdcount.org. You can also use the Merlin Bird ID app, which will use those same 4 keys to identification that we just talked about. It's a great backup when you're learning, and helps you because once you put those keys in, it'll give you pictures that'll help you look at the bird. But it's good to have that foundation that we just gave you in your back pocket before you put that on your smartphone. Anyone can participate. Like I said, again, if you already know which birds you're seeing, you can just submit a list on eBird like you usually do. I think the next slide, we have the address, www.birdcount.org/participate. There's just a few steps that you have to go through to participate. They also take photos and show them during the bird count, and they have a map that your birds show up on like in almost real time. So it's really fun. And then once you're done with the Great Backyard Bird Count, keep sharing your bird sightings on eBird. The data that you collect can help document distribution, abundance, habitat use, and trends. And it can help researchers and scientists, and it can even maybe help us in our efforts to manage the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'll turn it back over to Amanda for a couple more slides, and then we'll go on to questions.
Yeah, I'm just putting in a plug. If you guys, if you've got birders here that want to help out and you're birding outside, we've got 2 more years to complete our New York Breeding Bird Atlas. So this is our 3rd atlas. The first one was completed in the 80s, and then another one in the early 90s, I think, or no, the 80s to 90s, and then the early 2000s. So they're done kind of every 20 years. And so they've divided the state up into these blocks. So the darker the color, the more coverage. So you can see that we've still got a lot of ground to cover in New York. So all these yellow colors and lighter colors are areas where we need more survey work. So this is fun. You get to go out and bird. The only thing is you have to pay a little bit closer attention to look for breeding behaviors. So we're particularly looking for evidence of nests, of breeding behaviors, of feeding young birds. So this is another great community science opportunity to get involved in so that we can learn more about our birds across the state. And again, there's that website. Once we're done sharing here, I will paste these links into the chat box for you. But yeah, I think that's all I have. I think, Pammy, are you all set?
I am.
All right, I'll stop sharing for now so I can put those in the chat box.
Sure.
And it looks like Wendy already put in our bird checklist for the Albany Pine Bush. Thank you very much, Wendy. And we have some questions in our Q&A. I don't know if you want to take one, Pammy, while I put in those links.
Yeah, let me see. Let me get over there. Get it open. Let's see. One of our first questions was, what is the difference between a raven and a crow? So if we're identifying them, the raven is going to be a bit bigger. They're gonna look a little bit different because their bill's gonna be a little bit heavier. They're gonna have more feathers around their bill. Let me try and think of what other things. Their call, the raven has a more raspy kind of call.
I can do a raven. I can do a raven pretty good. So the raven, especially when they're flying over, they're like, different than like the harsh caw of the crow.
Right. So I hope that answered that question.
You can also look for the wedge tail on the raven. The crows have a blunt tail, so all the tail feathers are the same length, but on a crow, those middle ones are longer. So you get that kind of wedge shaped in profile, or well, of the whole tail when the tail is out. All right, let's see. Lauren asked, what time of year do you survey? So our point counts are done during the breeding season because we're interested in what birds are breeding in the pine bush. So same for our community science surveys. We're looking for breeding behaviors because that's when the birds are singing the most. So for the American woodcock, that starts around April 20th and goes into the first week or 2 of May. And for the whippoorwills, there are actually 2 survey windows in May and also in June. So mostly during the summer. Kelly, I agree. The Merlin app is awesome.
Yeah.
But it isn't infallible, just so everybody knows. It's good to have this background and not depend completely on AI to do your bird ID.
Yes, I was doing sounds one time and it told me that my dog was a great blue heron.
Let's see. Birds and squirrels seem to have slowed their eating at our feeders. Is this because it has been warmer? Do you want to take that one, Pammy?
I don't know why.
I mean, it could
It could
be.
be, it could be that there's more hawks eating birds than the squirrels do.
That is an
Because I have
excellent
been
sign.
seeing
Yeah.
them more.
Yeah. If you have birds at your feeder and all of a sudden there's no birds at your feeder, you should look for a raptor. I mean, but it could be we've had snow cover up until recently. And so it might have been harder for the squirrels to find their buried caches of food. So that might be why they're not feeling the need to
Right.
visit the feeders.
Yeah, I'm just thinking they're finding it somewhere else now.
Oh, Bob says we have a red-winged blackbird in our yard all winter. Is this unusual? That is kind of unusual, Bob. I'm not sure where exactly you're located, but in this area, there's certainly a bird they're kind of nomadic. Like they will stick around up here if they can find food. And especially if they find a feeder, they will stick around all winter long. But usually we find the red wings kind of get pushed further south by the weather and the inability for them to find food because they're really kind of seed eaters this time of year. So it's kind of unusual to have them year round. It's kind of fun. I like them. I hope you do. There are some bird calling apps. Any you like or would recommend? So Laura, I have the Sibley app on my phone. I like that because it has great visuals and you can look at similar species side by side. So you can actually click over and the app tells you what birds look similar to the one you're looking at. And then you can look at them side by side, which is nice. But it'll also show you the calls side by side. So you can play the two calls right by each other and see how different they sound. And it's got a pretty good variety of audio recordings in it. So it's got a good mix of calls and songs, and also both songs from like different localities, because believe it or not, birds have accents. So a prairie warbler in New York can sound very different than a prairie warbler down in Florida, for instance. So having that like variety in locations where the calls and songs were recorded is kind of helpful. So I like that one. I think I like it a lot for the visuals and being able to compare similar species. As far as calls are concerned, they're pretty, I don't know. Do you have a app that you like, Pammy?
I've just been using the Merlin one because I just use that one for the ID as well. But like I said, you have to check and even with the ID.
Cheryl asks, will this be available to watch again? So Cheryl, we are recording. So yes, it will. I mean, Wendy can correct me, but hopefully it will go up on our YouTube channel. Yeah.
I saw one that I can. Oh, Eileen asked, during the cold weather 2 weeks ago, the birds at my feeders were puffed up like they were wearing down puffer jackets. Which feathers puffed up to keep them warm? So they actually have down feathers, which are in there that they puff up, and just like a puffer jacket, they're exactly for that. And that's how they keep warm. And you'll also notice them standing on one foot with one foot up, and that's so that they can warm up the one foot and then they switch.
Jeffrey asks which birds can talk. I mean, so I'm assuming that you mean which birds can talk human language, because they can all talk. It's just that we don't understand them. They understand each other. So I assume you mean human language. So there's actually a pretty wide variety that can mimic human speech. So a lot of this parrots and parakeets can mimic human speech, but so can there's the starlings that we have around here. I mean, we consider them kind of a nuisance bird, but they have pretty extraordinary repertoires for vocalizations. They can mimic other birds and they can actually mimic human speech pretty well. Also, some of our other mimics like catbirds and northern mockingbirds can mimic human sounds. Let's see, crows can, ravens can. There's a really cool bird that everybody should look up videos of. It's called the lyrebird in Australia, and those birds are extraordinary. They mimic the craziest sounds. If anybody's seen what was Attenborough's birds special, I can't remember the name of it, but he had a feature on lyrebirds, and they were replicating the sound of the camera shutters. So they're an extraordinary bird. So I guess it's kind of a case of convergent evolution, meaning that a whole bunch of different lineages have independently evolved this ability to replicate the sounds that humans make.
Mm-hmm. Super cool.
Oh, thank you for the comments, everybody. Yesterday, when I was jogging through the woods, I saw a female hawk drop from the sky and hobble over to a shrub. And then I heard little chirps. I can birdwatch after a long time, a long ways away, of course. I don't want to get pecked. Any suggestions on how? I heard. Sorry, I don't have a name here. Anonymous attendee, if you want to resubmit your question, I'm not 100% sure what you're asking.
Yeah.
Oh, Pammy, do you want to handle Jacqueline's question? She says, what type of birdhouse can I install for birds?
So it depends on what kind of bird you want to have come to your house. So there are different sizes of holes and different shapes of houses that you can get. So what you want to do is decide what kind of birds are in your area, and then look for the right type of house for them to be in. And you can look all that stuff up online. It's really easy. And if you have get into trouble, you can always reach out to us.
So somebody asked if scarlet tanagers are seen in the area at all and in the pine bush. The answer is yes. Yes, they are very much a canopy bird. So it is a real treat if they come down to eye level. And I mean, they do, but most of the time they're spending it way up in the canopy. So you're going to end up with what we call warbler neck, which is what like birders do when they're trying to ID a warbler, like you're looking straight up through your bins. But yes, scarlet tanagers are around, certainly not now, but in the summer. Ooh, can you walk at the Pine Bush anytime? You absolutely can. All of the trails are open 24/7. Our Discovery Center is open. Actually, I'm not sure I know the hours. Pammy, do you know the hours of the Discovery Center?
You know what? I don't.
I think it's 9 to 4 weekdays and 10 to 4 weekends.
I think that might be right. Wendy?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Oh, someone asked, I'm down in Rockaway during the week. Do I need to sign up separately for the bird count starting tomorrow? So the bird count, you just go on that birdcount.org site and you enter your bird count there.
So Thomas says, I see groups of crows flying north along the river near Rensselaer starting around 3:30. Where are they going? And also, why is it so seemingly so rare to see bluebirds? So Thomas, yeah, these first off, a group of crows is called a murder, which is, I mean, pretty cool in and of itself. And then when you only have like 2 crows, that's an attempted murder, which, I mean, come on, that's a good bird pun. But the crows tend to flock up and go to roosting locations at nighttime, which are usually in more urban areas because it's a little bit warmer, I think. And so a lot of times you'll see that happening, especially this time of year when it's colder, they all like flock up and go to these roosting locations for the night. And so basically when you're seeing that, you're seeing them going from wherever they were foraging, and they're kind of all like coalescing to end up back at their roosting sites. Do cardinals travel in pairs? I mean, they frequently stay paired, so you can frequently see males and females together even in the winter, but I don't know if they are truly monogamous or not. I'm not sure. Oh my goodness. I don't know if anybody's seen the drama behind me, but my kitten is irritating Trooper.
I thought something was going on back.
Oh, David, that's a tough question. How can I keep the house sparrows away from my bird feeders? They just empty them onto the ground. So house sparrows, I mean, house sparrows are an introduced species. I actually learned fairly recently that house sparrows and I think starlings were introduced by some guy who wanted to bring all of the birds in Shakespeare's.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
Everything in Shakespeare wanted to bring over to America for some reason. So they are kind of a nuisance bird. They can be pretty violent, especially with like other cavity nesting birds too. It's a real problem. I don't know that I have a good suggestion for you. I know that's a huge problem, especially in urban areas. The one thing I can tell you is that you can take heart in that you are supporting these species, because they're actually in they're in decline in their native ranges. So they may seem like a nuisance here, but where they're actually from, they're not doing so hot. So maybe we can take a little bit of joy in that. But that is definitely a problem. Oh, and that also reminds me, I didn't answer the rest of the question about the bluebirds. So bluebirds are one of those species that was in decline, and then there was a huge effort, mainly by citizens and members of the public, that really tried to bring these guys back by putting up these bluebird houses, bluebird boxes everywhere. So bluebirds have made a pretty extraordinary recovery. They're a little bit hard to find this time of year because they are usually during the summer, they're insect eaters. So they will stick around in the winter, but they do get a little bit harder to find in the winter time. The fun thing is sometimes they stay in big flocks in the winter. So sometimes you can see like 10 or 12 bluebirds at a time, which is fun, but they definitely prefer more kind of open habitat. So not something that you're really going to see in suburbia per se.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, there's so many questions.
Oh, I see Susan saying, hard to keep track of all the different plumage my field guide shows. Male, female, breeding, non-breeding, juvenile, adult. What time of year would we expect breeding plumage, and is it the same across species? So usually the breeding plumage is in the spring because they're trying to get their mates. So that would be when most of them would have breeding.
Pammy, somebody did know, and you kind of like we lose your audio sometimes, like you get kind of quiet.
Okay.
It like cuts out on you.
Huh. Okay. I'll try to like lean in at the end or something.
There you go. Something fun about that plumage question. So yeah, for most of our species here, they're putting on their fancy breeding plumage. Yeah. Like over the winter. And what's fun is like most of our songbirds or our perching birds, they do that. They do that while they're like foraging and out flying. And so they're able to still move around and fly. Our ducks, on the other hand, like at the end of the breeding season, just like drop all their flight feathers. And that's why ducks disappear. I did not know this until I started like studying birds. And then I was like, oh yeah, I mean, where do the ducks go at the end of the summer? They're just gone all of a sudden. And the reason they're gone is because they drop all of their flight feathers at once, which seems counterintuitive to me. It seems crazy.
It's crazy.
They drop all those flight feathers, so they're hiding. They're still here. They're just like, they're hiding. and they'll come back out once they've grown in those flight feathers again. So birds usually replace their flight feathers at the end of the breeding season. So a lot of, especially the ones that migrate, are going to replace all their flight feathers, and they usually replace their body feathers, which are the ones that get really fancy and colorful for the breeding season, on the wintering grounds before they come back. What do you know about the Northeast Avian Rescue or other places we can check out in the Albany, Schenectady, Troy areas and volunteer? That is a good question, Lisa. I'm not super, I know of like a couple rescues. I know actually that like one of the biggest things that a lot of the rehabbers and rescuers need is transportation. Because some of these places are few and far between. So, or they need to take a bird because they don't have the facilities to take care of it. They need somebody to transfer the bird to another location. So North Country Wild Care, I think, is one that does a lot of like, like a lot of rehabbers don't know how to take birds, but I think North Country Wild Care does do birds, and they have a pretty big, volunteer corps that they use for transporting birds to different rehabbers. Oh, that's an interesting question. Judy says, do birds sleep in their nests or merely feed their young there? Some sleep in their nests, especially like cavity nesters.
Yeah, and some sleep in like, especially in the winter, the cavity nesters will stay in those areas because that stay warm.
That's true. Yeah, I actually have some bluebird boxes at my parents' place, and the downy woodpeckers like hang out inside them in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Judy said, I have had no luck drawing a bluebird to my bird box. Instead, keep getting sparrows. Yeah, I mean, so Judy, one of the things that I've heard is if you put up more than one box, supposedly the tree swallows will nest in the boxes, and they're very, very aggressive. So they will chase out the house sparrows, but not the bluebirds. So like your ideal situation is you have two bluebird boxes, and one of them has tree swallows and the other one has bluebirds. That's what I've heard. And I have heard of some success with that. I mean, sometimes you have habitat that's bluebird habitat, but not necessarily tree swallow habitat. So in that case, you just might not be able to get them. But I've always heard to put up at least two for that reason.
Yeah, me too.
How can I keep bees away from my hummingbird feeder?
I don't know.
I don't know. Probably what you actually have coming are, I'm guessing they're yellow jackets. They're very common for doing that. I don't know.
Hey, Dylan.
Yeah.
I've heard that sometimes it has to do with the yellow color that is used on hummingbird feeders for the flowers. So if the flowers are yellow, try switching them out for ones that are white.
All right, there we go. Wendy for the win.
Thanks, Wendy.
I captured a flock of red-winged blackbirds with common grackles on my trail cam last month and saw a bunch of red-winged blackbirds at a different location this week. Do common grackles and red-winged blackbirds travel together? They do. So those blackbirds like to get together during migration in these huge mixed flocks. There's usually some cowbirds mixed in, brown-headed cowbirds. Sometimes there's rusty blackbirds mixed in. Sometimes the starlings join in the party. So yeah, it's kind of one of these strength in number things during migration. And also, you know, if you see a blackbird there and there's like a whole bunch of blackbirds there, it probably means there's something awesome for blackbirds there. So let's go check that out. Yeah, they are one of those, the blackbirds kind of flock together in these mixed flocks during migration and during winter. Why don't you count birds in summer? Sharon, so we do. So We don't count birds in like the heat of the summer because the birds stop singing. So once the birds have young and they start feeding them, they actually stop singing. So it gets really hard to detect them. So it's not that they're not still there and you can't see them. It's just they're not as easy to detect. So we really try to target, for example, for our point count surveys, we try to do them when the birds are singing, which is kind of the spring into the early summer. As soon as they've got nestlings, they're super busy and they're not singing anymore. Sometimes birds will nest again, so they'll sing more often, but most of the time for our species, once they've got young to feed, they're not singing anymore. Allie wants to know if we will have a summertime bird info webinar. I mean, maybe, Allie. Seems to be pretty popular. We have turkeys. We have turkeys roaming our backyard pretty much every day. Different groups, seems females and males. Do they have common roosting locations? Do you know about turkeys? I'm not super familiar.
So turkeys roost in trees. They actually fly up in the trees at night and roost up there, and they roost in flocks. Yep.
Pretty cool. Where can we find the story about the man who introduced the birds in Shakespeare? Did I hear you right? You did hear us right, Jeff.
Just look up "man who introduced Shakespeare birds" and it'll come up.
Yeah. Oh, so this is an interesting question. What causes huge flocks of birds to all fly at once and together? Is there a bird leading the group? So this has been like the topic of research because it's almost like when these birds get into these flocks, they act like this super organism and it's unclear. And I think recent research suggests that the birds are like reacting to the ones around them. So it's like this kind of wave. There isn't like one bird that's leading the charge. It's just like they're all kind of following each other. So like, especially in these like murmurations, when you see these flocks of birds that are just kind of morphing and moving all over the sky, it's really, they're kind of acting more like this super organism, and the birds are just taking cues from the ones around them and reacting. It's really interesting stuff. Somebody said, okay, so somebody says, try filling your feeders with safflower seeds to deter the starlings. Interesting. I've not heard that one before. Is it difficult for birds to nest in the Albany Pine Bush due to fire management practices? That's a good question, Paul. Certainly, if we do burn during the summer, that is probably going to impact some species. And so when we burn not all of the pine bush at once. So we're not going to like wipe out everything. But there is a chance that we're going to negatively impact a few individuals. Our hope is that, and we have seen that birds will re-nest if their first nest fails. So the adults in that situation are flighted and they will abandon the nest. And in the case of fire or in the case of any kind of disturbance that they think is going to cause the nest to fail. And they will breed and nest again. And in most cases, they have time to successfully fledge another group of young. Some birds, like mourning doves, just kind of breed continuously as they feel like it, or as resources allow. Liz says, we've had a male house sparrow roosting at night on our side door roof overhang for the past 2 months. Recently, a female sparrow has started to spend the night sleeping nearby. Could this be a mating pair? It could be. It could be. Although a lot of times it takes, especially perching birds or songbirds, it usually takes the young birds a little bit of time to get into full adult plumage. So sometimes young male birds can look like female birds. So it could be a male from last year that just hasn't gotten that nice black throat. That black throat gets bigger as they age, basically. But it could be a mated pair, in which case you want to make sure you don't have any cavities, because they will just keep sticking stuff in a cavity thinking that they're making a nest, and then you just find a pile of grass somewhere. Nancy says, are there eagles in the pine bush? There are. So not breeding. We have never found a nest. So they do visit Rensselaer Lake. And they do kind of frequent the Albany Road Waste Management Facility. I mean, easy pickings, they're scavengers. So, I mean, we like to think of them as this majestic bird, but sometimes they eat from the dump.
That's what they do.
Ooh, so David says in the spring, and just the other day, I heard red-headed woodpeckers tapping on rain gutters. Is this their way of communicating or trying to scare away other birds? Yeah, the woodpeckers, I've heard of them doing this, because it's loud. So the woodpeckers are trying to find the loudest thing to tap on, because that is a territorial sound when they're doing the tapping. So sometimes the tapping noise is just them trying to like peck and feed on something. But when they're doing like their loud pecking noises, that is territorial, and they will try to find the thing that's going to resonate the most. And so they will do that on gutters. So yeah, very possible that that is one that's starting to do some territorial behavior.
Making his space.
What kind of birds are in murmurations? So a lot of times around here, it's the blackbirds. So starlings, cowbirds, redwings. Excuse me.
Oh, Nancy asked, do birds mostly migrate at night? And a lot of birds do migrate at night, especially songbirds, because then they can't get taken out by their prey, their the hawks and things that like to eat.
Oh, Carol, that's a great question. Carol says, when I was a child, we were told to not touch a nest because the mama would not come back to sit on the eggs if touched by human hands. True or false? False. So it's not that birds don't have a sense of smell, but they're going to be more concerned with raising their young than they are that it smells like a human. We think that concern came from the fact that what you could be doing is leaving a scent for a predator to find a nest. So you don't want to get into the habit of going and handling the baby birds and putting them back in the nest just because you know the parents will come back, because you could be drawing predators, like scent-based predators like foxes or raccoons. Even chipmunks are nest predators. I like to spoil people's dreams about chipmunks because they're terrors. So if you find an egg or a baby bird on the ground and you see the nest, you can absolutely pick that up and put it back in the nest. And the adults should come back and still take care of it. That drive to take care of their young is going to supersede any smell that they're picking up on that from you. Oh, Susan says, do migratory birds return to the exact same territory year after year? I've seen a green heron in particular area of the pine bush the last couple summers, and I'm wondering what's the chance it's the same bird. So we call that territory, we call that like fidelity. So when a bird comes back to the same place a lot of times. And yeah, songbirds, I mean, I think pretty much all the birds, if they have a successful experience at a site, they will come back to it and they will breed there again. So the fact that they successfully breeded there the year before or bred there the year before is a good indication that they will come back to that same spot again.
Yeah.
So it is very possible that is the same green heron individual. Oh, interesting. Paul says, how does artificial light on your property affect birds visiting and nesting on your property? I don't know how it affects birds. I don't know if Pammy has heard anything about how the artificial light affects birds.
The only thing I know about is when they're migrating, you don't want to have a lot of lights because it messes them up because they're looking for things like the stars and the moon and things like that. And when they have all the artificial light, that messes them up. But I think that if you have the lights shining down, that doesn't affect it as much. And the only thing I would think of is it might impact owls or something like that. But I'm not really sure that it would be that.
Yeah,
other than the migration.
Yeah, I've heard about it in migration. I've heard about lights like at night affecting insects, which are the food item of some birds. So I think that some birds, nocturnal birds, have been known to like hunt under lights at night because it's like concentrates the bugs. But yeah, I think I agree, Pammy. The only effect I've heard of is
like I think it kind of helps those nocturnal birds that are looking for the insects because they know where to look because they're all there.
Let's see. My husband asked about a crying out circling hawk, looking for a mate, prey, or marking territory. That can be territorial for sure. Like our hawks, like red-tailed hawks, are pairing up right now. So for sure that could be a territorial display, or it could even be a mating display. Some of our raptors have some spectacular mating displays. So absolutely that could be a raptor. Is it true that bird bones are hollow?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
They
indeed.
are.
Oh, thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, I would encourage you to sign up for some of our community science opportunities. That would be great to have your help. This is not a telescope. This is a microscope. When I'm not studying birds, I'm studying bees. Oh, we answered that one. I think we're doing pretty good.
I think we answered most of them.
Oh, except for Don. I saw a bird on the SUNY campus sitting on the branch of an oak tree. It looked like it had the head of a duck and a white head and neck with gray or blue-gray feathers. The head of the bird was large compared to its body. Nothing is immediately coming to mind, Donald. I would suggest, like Pammy kind of went through how to I would put that into Merlin.
In Merlin, yeah.
And like put in where on the bird you saw those colors. And then, also all that other context Pammy talked about, like the habitat you were in, the locate, like the date, what time of year was it? Nothing comes immediately to mind.
Me either. It doesn't really pop out at me.
So
yeah, my best bet would be to go to the Merlin and put that stuff in and see what happens. See what comes up.
The other thing to keep in mind is that you do sometimes get aberrant plumages on birds. So you can get birds that are supposed to be one color, but because of some of the yellows and reds and oranges on birds are diet based. So if they eat something different, that can change the color of their feathers. Some birds can have some kind of genetic disposition that makes their colors come in the wrong color. So you see this sometimes with like piebald birds that have some white feathers, or leucistic birds that don't have, like, they're paler in color. So possible that's kind of what you were seeing, is a bird that had some atypical plumage coloration, some aberrant plumage coloration. That seems possible. We don't have a whole lot of ducks that sit in trees other than wood ducks, which would definitely not have a white head unless they had some leucism or something going on. Are breeding songs and territory songs the same? I think so.
I think so.
What birding book would you recommend for beginner? That's a good question. One of the ones that I have that I really like for reference is Crossley ID Guide. Because what Crossley did is he took birds and he kind of put them in the context of how you would see them. So he has a whole page for each species, and on that page he has the bird in all the different plumages. He has it sitting like perched, he has it showing flying. So that's I think that's kind of nice for beginners, because a lot of times, like we have this nice, perfect illustration of what this bird looks like, that 90% of the time, that's not how you're going to see it, right? You're going to see it like flying through some bushes, or you're going to see it up at the top of a tree. So I think the Crossley idea is kind of nice in that it kind of puts the birds in context, and they're also photographs instead of illustrations. So it makes it like a little bit more relatable, I think. Do you have a favorite book, Pammy?
I don't. I like that one too, because it has everything together like that. Yeah, I mean, one that I always have in my backpack is the National Geographic one, just because that's the one I learned from my Kobe. So I know like where the different groups are. But it's really something that's really personal. It depends on how you like to look at things, or how you like it grouped and things like that as well. Because some of them are grouped differently.
Oh, Paul, that's a good question. Paul said, where's a good source list in New York State to find the best native plants to attract and keep birds on my property? That's really great, because that's some of the best stuff you can do for birds, is actually plant natives. I'm not 100%
I think
sure.
Audubon has a list. I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, or Cornell, I was gonna say. Like,
yeah, I think it's Audubon.
So yeah, I maybe check, like maybe just try Googling Audubon New York State bird plant or something. But that's a great way to try and attract birds. Like that's a really good point. Some people are saying they had trouble with feeders with squirrels and sparrows and stuff. You could ditch the feeder and actually put native species in the yard. It'll be more work for you to see the birds, but if you planted some native shrubs that the birds would come and eat the berries off of, for example, that might be a way to kind of overcome those pesky house sparrows. Lisa, do only the male birds sing? So most of the time it's the male birds, Lisa, but in some cases like Carolina wrens, the northern cardinals, the females do sing. And I think we're finding that maybe in more species than we originally thought. So are ravens more vocal than crow? I would say ravens have a more varied vocalizations. Like they do a lot of different kinds of calls, and it's kind of fun to hear them like flying over, playing, and making crazy noises. I think that crows are also capable of it. I'm not sure if we just don't hear them making those noises as often, or did you find something and put it in the chat, Pammy?
Yeah, I put the one that I was thinking of in the chat, the Audubon.
Oh, great.
One. Beginner's Guide to Native Plants for Birds.
Perfect. Okay, we've got that one. Did that one. My cardinals arrive first thing in the morning, stay 5 to 7 minutes like clockwork. They return just before it gets dark. Do they sleep in pine trees somewhere? I have taken photos and made several videos with music. Oh, that's awesome. That sounds really nice, Diane. They're really shrubby birds. They kind of like dense tangles. So I've actually been trying for the breeding bird atlas. I've been trying to find a cardinal nest, and they're so common. It seems like it should be so easy, but they really like that dense stuff. So, but they will kind of forage far and wide. So, but they clearly have a pattern, by you. We feed some of the chickadees in our yard out of our hands. Oh, that's wonderful, Kelly. Is that safe for them? Oh, I mean, sure. I don't think it's not safe for them, as long as you're not trying to grab them and feed them to a hawk or something.
Right.
You might
Or
want
if
to
you
wash
have some
your hands.
pesticides on your hands or something, just make sure your
Yeah.
hands are clean.
Make sure your hands are clean and clean your hands afterwards.
Right.
Oh, does warm weather now confuse bird behavior? That is one of the concerns with climate change, is that there'll be these shifts. So birds are going to come back early because of the warmer temperatures, but maybe the plants aren't going to be like, the insects aren't going to be out. And so there is a concern, you know, that there's going to be like these mismatches due to climate change. But there are probably, so it's probably going to be a mix, right? There's going to be some species that aren't going to do so well in climate change. The other thing is that there are species like that are higher elevation species. And the thought is, you know, they can't go any higher up those mountains, like Bicknell's thrush are already kind of on the peaks in the Adirondacks. And they're not really going to have anywhere to go. They're going to kind of get pinched off. So probably in the face of climate change, it's some of the species are going to do not so well. Most of them will probably be okay. And some of them might actually benefit because they'll have a larger habitat that they're able to take advantage of. So it's going to be a mix, and some of them will be sad stories, I'm sure. Have ospreys nested in the pine bush? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. I think the only place they would be over by Rensselaer Lake.
Right.
And I don't think they ever have. Any effective way to avoid bird strikes on my windows? Geraldine, great question. So there are some treatments. The American Bird Conservancy, ABC, they have done a lot of research with different treatments that you can put on windows to keep birds from striking. And they actually sell a few different things that you can buy. So they're basically kind of like the problem with the windows is that the reflection looks just like more habitat, right? Especially if you have habitat around your yard. So the idea is you need to like put something on the window that lets the bird know that that's a solid surface, not more forest. And so they sell these stickers and things that you can put on the windows that break up that reflection. So the bird actually acknowledges that that's like a surface and not more habitat. So I would check out the American Bird Conservancy.
Yeah, they have a lot of great resources. And I think they had like a webinar that's recorded that you can watch about different ways to help keep birds from striking the window.
Our bobolinks declining. Used to see them all the time in our hayfield, but not so much anymore. Yeah, bobolinks are so the groups of birds that are not doing so good. Grassland birds, I think, are doing the poorest. And after that is the shrubland birds. And so, yeah, a lot of that is loss of habitat, but also timing of management. So bobolinks frequently will nest in fields, but then the fields need to be mowed, especially if they're for hay. And then that interferes with the nesting. It causes the nests to fail. So there have been some efforts by groups to like work with farmers to time their mowing when the birds are fledged. But it's kind of tricky, you know, they don't have hay fields for bobolinks. They have hay fields because they can make money from the hay. So it's kind of a hard sell sometimes. Sometimes it works out and it can be this nice partnership, but sometimes the timing of the mowing, depending on where they are, like they need to mow it. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. So bobolinks are one of those species that's in decline. Blue jays are also annoying with my bird houses that have babies in the summer. Yeah, blue jays. I mean, again, so we think of blue jays as a songbird, but they're actually a small crow. They're in the same family as the crows and the ravens, and they are nest predators for sure. Easy meals. It's just easy meals sitting in that nest. I mean, you could haze them to try and keep them away. And by haze them, I mean like spraying with a garden hose or something, or try to run out at them and scare them away. But it might be hard because then you might also scare away the residents. But I would think that hazing, I don't know if Pammy, you have any thoughts?
That would be the same thing that I would do. Because yeah, they are.
Can you show us that book, Crossley?
I put
don't
a
have a
link in the chat. I just put
good.
a link with the title and his name so they could.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, and Mary says Master Gardeners at Cornell, Albany County also has a bird list. Excellent. Habitat is important. All the yards add up to the size of a preserve or a national park. Yeah, Paul, good point, Paul. Yep. I think I've actually heard that there's more land area tied up in lawns than there is in national parks. So yeah. If we all were to turn our lawns into
get rid of your lawn.
Get rid of that lawn. Put in some flowers for the bees and some shrubs for the birds.
Yep.
Oh, that's it. Susan says, I love listening to mockingbirds doing a long string of mimicked calls and sometimes car alarms. But do they also have a song or call that's actually theirs? I would say their call sound is pretty distinct to them. It's like a kissing noise. But brown thrashers kind of sound a little bit similar. But yeah, no, I don't think they have, other than their call, I don't think they have anything exclusive to them. What does it mean when you see a group of hawks flying overhead together? So usually that means they found a thermal. So hawks take advantage of thermals that like these warm uprisings of air that carry them up really high so they can catch those currents. Those air currents thousands of feet up in the air. That usually happens during migration. So when you see that, those are usually raptors that are migrating. And so they found a thermal and they're all carrying it up to go and catch one of the jet streams or something to migrate. Any idea how to prevent woodpecker from pecking the metal chimney gas fireplace? Last year, they came every morning and pecked from 5 to 6:30 a.m. all spring. I turned on the fireplace to get them away. My roof is way too tall to get up there to hang anything to deter them. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, if you had a garden hose that you put one of those like jet things on, you could, yeah. I mean, going back to that hazing thing, like just try to make them not want to be there. That is unfortunate. I think I would be
not
upset about that. Should we stop filling our bird feeders in spring when flowers and plants start to bloom? Paul, I don't think you have to. I think you can change what type of food that you feed. So I think they want fat in the winter. And I think in the spring and the summer, they, like especially the females need more minerals to make eggshells and babies and stuff. So you can change the diet up a little bit. You do want to make sure, because it's warmer, sometimes bird feeders can be havens for viruses and diseases because the birds are clustering and concentrated there. So especially in the warmer months, you want to make sure that you're taking them down and cleaning and disinfecting them regularly. I don't think you have to stop using them. The birds, you might see birds coming to them less because especially some of our seed eaters actually feed insects and invertebrates to their young. So they might not be coming for the seeds to the feeders during the summer. Could a hawk pick up a small dog? How much weight could a hawk lift up and fly away with? I don't think a hawk could pick up a small dog. I think the biggest thing that a hawk, I mean, I've seen a red tail struggling with a rabbit. I think that might be the upper end of what they would be able to fly away with. Now, a great horned owl, on the other hand,
That's a different story.
yeah, a great horned owl could take a small dog. I mean, they're taking skunks. They could definitely take a small dog or a cat for sure. But the biggest hawk we have around here is the red tail. And yeah, I don't think that could take a dog. Norma, I like your story. Very nice about the bluebirds. I see something similar happen. My parents put out mealworms for the bluebirds, and yeah, the other birds kind of swarm it, and the bluebirds just kind of wait patiently. Oh, so Mary says, I think it was the Master Gardeners. I think she says they're having a native plant sale and education day on June 3rd, 2023. I think, Mary, you were the one who was commenting about the Master Gardeners. Yes. Okay. Excellent. So yeah, thank you, Mary. Good to know. Could feeding the birds and bird feeders attract a bear? Yes. Yes. I believe we had a bear at our feeder after a burn in the pine bush. Yes. Very possible. The bears, they're not coming for the birds. They're coming for the seeds. But yes, absolutely. And usually the protocol, once you have a bear, is you kind of have to take the feeder down because the bear will keep coming every day. So you got to take that feeder down, at least until you know the bear's out of the area. We have to cover our car outside mirrors because the robins peck at them a lot. Hazing doesn't harm. Other recommendations. Yeah. Man, these birds, my sister had, it was a cardinal that would come every day and just yell at himself in the rearview mirror on the car. Covering them sounds like a good solution. I think that's probably your best bet.
That's probably the best bet.
Hazing doesn't harm. I mean, that's the whole point. It's hazing is just to try and make them uncomfortable and like make it more uncomfortable for them to keep doing what they're doing than not. So hazing, like spraying them with water or something. I mean, certainly don't spray them with water when it's freezing outside, and don't throw like fireworks at them or something. Oh, somebody says suet cakes can distract woodpeckers from pecking unwanted places, I've noticed. So interesting. Thank you for sharing for Iz and their chimney woodpecker. All right. I'm thinking that we've got most of these. Oh, right. I saw a cardinal flying after a male cardinal, very rare to see, chasing away from his mate. Very possible, Carol. Yeah, cardinals are pretty aggressive and very frequently, yes, you will see them chasing away another cardinal because they're being territorial. All right. When to fill up hummingbird feeders in the spring. Oh, so Marion, there's actually a cool website. I can try to find it that actually tracks the hummingbirds as they're moving north. Let's see. Here you go. I'm going to put this in the chat. So this is a website that actually uses eBird data, I believe, to track the hummingbirds moving north. So that should help you time putting out your hummingbird feeder. Kathy is recommending David Sibley's What It's Like to Be a Bird. Fabulous resource about all things bird. Thank you, Kathy. I don't know if I read that one. How important is a water source or running water? Paul, that can be really important, especially during the winter.
Mhm.
Because once it's all frozen, it's hard. It's not intuitive, right? There's water everywhere, but the birds don't have a way to take it in if it's frozen. So you can get little heaters that you can put in your bird feeders or your bird baths. Or you can have like a little water fountain going. And those get pretty popular in the winter months.
Mhm.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, everybody. I hope you had learned something. I hope if you haven't visited the Pine Bush, you will visit. I hope you'll take advantage of some of the community science opportunities we spoke about.
And don't forget to count birds this weekend.
Yes, that's this weekend. I'm just going to pop my email in the chat, and then Patty or Pammy, if you want to do the same thing.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
way, anybody, you can always email us if you have any other questions. The book just mentioned was, where did I might have gotten rid of it. What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Sibley. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for your comments.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.